it was a lot easier, I think, Father's Day when I was a kid, because it seemed like everyone had their dad around, and it was real simple. You had the basic sermon about being a father, or whatever. You might tie in how God is the perfect father, but it's gotten a little bit more difficult talking about on Father's Day because a lot of people don't have their fathers around, and so it's a little bit of a more complicated issue. There's a funny kind of thing that, and I kind of troubled over what to name this sermon because it makes it sound like, there's a few people who are just like real big screw-ups or something, and you're going to see when I get to the end, that's not what we're talking about at all. The people who have caused the biggest problem in this church all have one single thing in common. It's uncanny. And this same thing, statistically, would change Otero and the rest of the world. And you might say, what is this thing? Bad relationships with their father. You would be surprised how big of a resounding issue this is. Like I say, every single person that has ever been here and caused a problem that I'm aware of had a bad relationship with their father. It's foundationally important that this is something that we talk about, and I don't want anybody to feel like I'm singling anybody out. This is just the world we're living in. It's something that everybody's going through. God doesn't want you to walk around wounded. Did you know that? And when you have unresolved conflicts with your father, it makes it where you walk wounded. And that's not a good thing. That's definitely something we want to talk about. Now, I do want to clarify, though, because you're not doomed to cause problems. Just because, let's say, you had a rough relationship with your father, that doesn't mean you're doomed to cause problems. But it does mean that deep hurts cause deep hurts. And if you don't heal that deep hurt, the chances do definitely increase that you will in yourself hurt other people. I'll give you a couple examples. I had this one woman that was on a team that I had, and she was just, oh boy, she was nasty. I mean, she was real bitter. She always had that frown. It was like her perpetual frown face, Everything made her mad. She just gossiped about everything. She hated everything. Just any kind of solution I would bring to the table, she always had why it wouldn't work, why everything was doomed to failure. Well, obviously it got under my skin. Duh. Don't you love people nitpicking you and criticizing you on everything? Don't you just love that kind of stuff? Well, it wasn't until later that I was able to actually empathize with her. She had a big unresolved issue with her father, as it turned out. And she even said one time, she said, I've been like this for so long, I don't know if I can ever change. So then her father, who she did not make peace with, died. And so she didn't get the closure that she wanted and that she needed. I wish that was the only exception, but there are many more examples that I myself have experienced. There was a married couple that used to go here, and just real bitter situation that happened. I don't know whose fault it was. It's not really important, but the main issue that I want to focus in on is both of them had an abusive father, and then they got married, and they took that hurt everywhere that they went. Once again, this is not the only example, though. There was a woman who I actually knew and I was talking to and trying to just kind of work a friendship with, and she was not loved by her father. Her father really did not care about her at all. There's no way around that. And what ended up happening is she went from abusive relationship to abusive relationship. She constantly looked for that. She had that emotional need that was unresolved because her father never loved her. And he didn't make this like it was a secret. He said, "I do not like you." It wasn't like a surprise. There's a lot of research that's come out that's shown that a lot of the majority of people who are in prison have bad relationships with their fathers. Now, once again, you're not doomed. But if you have a bad relationship with your father, it's time to seek healing. I don't know whose fault it was. I don't care whose fault it is. You need healing. There was another person that just caused a big problem. It turned from a church conflict into a community problem. It blew way out of proportion. All kinds of stuff happened there. Well, as it turns out, she was molested by her father when she was a kid. and her mom did nothing about it. See what I mean? These things, we always think, oh, I'm in a bigger body now, so that means that I've matured. But the truth is, we still carry around the same hurts from when we were a child. There was another person I had on a team that couldn't be told what to do. Her father wasn't around. Well, after her mom got pregnant, he just kind of hit the road. There was a very talented young guy who just couldn't be told what to do. He really had the potential for a lot of natural talent. He could have really gone places, but every time that anybody would try and tell him what to do, he would get irrationally angry. He would walk out on that church had a choir. He would walk out on the choir practices. He would walk out on the sermons. He just couldn't deal with the fact of somebody telling what to do. Well, as it turns out, once again, an unresolved conflict with his father. We had a board member. This was the biggest single person who caused the greatest harm in the entire world of this church, the entire life of this church. This one person. And, they were a board member, and a big bunch of problems, a big power struggle and all this stuff. Well, as it turns out, his father was a drunk who wasn't there for him. And so he was the one who had to, drag his dad inside in the mornings when he was passed out on the front lawn. He was the one who had to go turn off the car and get the keys out of the car. See what I mean? That single thing. Every relationship, it's almost funny because every single relationship is affected by this one relationship that we have with our fathers. In my experience, it's the single greatest factor to problems that you have to deal with as a leader. Now, I want you to understand something abundantly clear. None of those people who caused all those problems in this church, none of them were the enemy. Sometimes when we deal with things that are very difficult, we start thinking that the person is the enemy. Maybe you have a bad attitude towards your father and you're thinking that he's the enemy. He's not the enemy either. See, sometimes people allow themselves to be used by Satan. And we always think, and this is something my wife was talking about, and I think she was really hit the mark on, we like to see people as Judas, the betrayers. Go out and hang yourself. But the truth is, a lot of times people are Peters. Peter betrayed Jesus just like Judas did. The only difference is he didn't kill himself. In fact, he turned around, and he was able to do really, really, really big things. Ended up dying as a martyr, so that's kind of a big deal. But I've noticed things with people who have a problem with their father. They say 3 statements over and over again. I'm going to lay them to you real quick because I don't really want to spend too much time on them. Number 1, I'm not bitter. For some reason, people who are incredibly bitter, that's the first thing out of their mouth. I'm not bitter. Number 2, I'm fine. Are you okay? I'm fine. They can't show weakness, which, once again, this is a defense mechanism. And then the third thing, I don't have conflicts in my life. Every single one of those people that I mentioned in those stories, every single one of them said all 3 of those statements. I know a lot of people who don't try because their father said that they wouldn't amount to anything. We deal with a lot of kids in the area. And their fathers tell them things like this. If you want my love, you have to earn it. And what happens is these burdens walk with us for the rest of our life if we don't seek healing. It's absolutely essential that you forgive your father and do whatever is necessary to heal that. Now, I wasn't born yesterday. I know that some people, you can't, I understand. I get it. But that doesn't mean that you can't have in your heart the willingness. If they're ever ready, if they ever reach a point of wanting to heal this, I forgive them. I know there's a lot of people out there that they don't want to hear it. I told you I didn't want anything to do with you. Why are you still here? I get it. I get it. But that doesn't mean you have to walk with the hurt. So we have bad encounters with authority figures, and then because we have those bad encounters, we develop bad attitudes towards authority. So then it becomes where we have an attitude problem with the position and not even the person anymore. And it transfers to the next person. Let's say, for instance, your father abused you, and then you go into another situation where there's somebody who's over you, an authority figure. You can't submit to their authority because you see someone who's trying to take advantage of you, just like the last person who was in that position. And you repeat the hurt with every single person that you go to. It's like if you watch pornography, it'll cause you to have bad attitude towards women, and then that attitude will just transfer to the different women in your life. You'll have a deteriorating relationship with your mother, then your wife, so on and so forth. The people who are the hardest to get along with in life. Now, remember this because this is extremely important. It will benefit you no matter where you go in life. The people who are the hardest to get along with have the greatest hurts. You have to stop seeing people as annoying and understand that they're hurt. Why is this important? Because when you change how you see someone, it changes how you can deal with them. If people are irritants to you, you won't ever seek to help them. You won't ever forgive them. But if you see them as not annoying, but as a hurt person, it changes how you deal with it. And the thing about this is it's not fair. There's no way around that. I'm not going to lie to you, it's not fair. You were treated unfair, and then you learned how to survive, but those same traits that got you to survive end up getting you in trouble. And you have to unlearn the things you learned and relearn what you already know. It's like, for instance, a soldier. You learn how to stay alive on the battlefield. And then you get home and you have to completely relearn how to fit into the world. It's a complete change of pace. The same thing happens with people who have dealt with childhood trauma. And what makes it even more unfair is that the hurt person has to initiate the healing. In our minds, we want to go something like this. I was the one who hurt. They should have to come to me and say sorry. But the truth is, most of the time that you get healing, you're going to have to take the first step. Somebody always has to take the first step. Everybody always wants the other person to, but it'll never work. As a general rule, forgive as you want to be forgiven. Oh, well, I forgave. Did you? 1 Peter 2:21-24 tells us of a similar situation where somebody was treated very unfair. It was an unjust situation, and yet their trust was in God. To this you were called because Christ suffered for you. Well, that wasn't fair. Leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth, so he didn't do anything to deserve it. When they hurled their insults at him, he didn't retaliate. He didn't shoot off his mouth. He didn't say something stupid. Do you do that when somebody's mistreating you? When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. Do you understand what he's saying there? What we do is we say, this person is treating me unfair. So then we take that to God. There was people treating Jesus unfair, so then he took, I'm saying it wrong, so I'll come back to that some later time because I'm saying it wrong. He himself bore our sins in his body on the cross so that we might die to sin and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. We can find healing no matter what's happened to you in your life. You can find healing, but the problem is we can't find it on our own terms. What we try to do is we try to hold on to the hurt. We try to justify ourselves, tell everybody else how we were the one who was wronged. You're never going to find healing that way. You might find a temporary justification in front of people, but you won't find healing. The only way to find healing is to die to yourself. And this is difficult because our pride will align itself with our hurt. The areas of greatest hurt will be our areas of greatest pride, and we won't be able to address them because it's a part of who we are. It's something that requires humility. If you don't forgive, though, now this is where things get a little bit irritating because there's no way around it. If you don't forgive those who hurt you, control the rest of your future. If you don't learn to forgive the people who hurt you, they will control the rest of your future. It will affect your relationships. It will affect your life choices. I've known many people who tried to get back at their father, so they made a poor decision, a really stupid decision, and it messed them up for the rest of their life. And, I'm getting him back. No, you're just kind of shooting yourself in the foot. You carry that around with you because you can't forgive. And your attitude will spread, by the way. If you have an attitude problem with one person, it always spreads. God kind of made us like that. It's not fair, yeah, but you still have to forgive, even though it's not fair. So we see something along like this. They deserve punishment. People need to know what happened. They can't get away scot-free after what they did. Romans 12:19, do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. Put it where it belongs. For it is written, it is mine to revenge. I will repay, says the Lord. The moral of the story being there, it's not our responsibility. And that's difficult because we were the ones who were hurt, so we think we need to be the judge and the jury. And it's difficult because we have to let God be the judge. And that's where it really gets hard. But the good news is that you are not responsible. This is very good news. You are not responsible for what others have done. You are responsible for what you do now. When you get to heaven, God isn't even going to, you're not going to have to answer about what all those other people did to you. It's about what you do with the time that's given to you. There are always reasons for bad attitudes that come in life. Don't find one. Find a reason to not have a bad attitude. It's like this. Don't be a murderer just because someone else tried to murder you. People are not your enemy. The devil is. And he sometimes gets to use some people to hurt and to divide. It's not something that we have to like. So somewhere in this conversation, we come to the place of why even bother? My dad is so long, I don't care. He's over there, I'm over here. Why even bother with it? Why mess with it? The very last thing that the Old Testament has to say before Jesus came, and it was 400 years before the Old Testament and the New Testament, the very last verse, the last thing that God has to say before Jesus, the Christ, the Savior, comes, the big finale of the Old Testament. He will turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the hearts of the children to their parents, or else I will come and strike the land with total destruction. Now the wording there is actually kind of important. The NIV tries to be more inclusive, so it says children to their parents. But if you look in a lot of the other translations, it's going to say something that I think is a lot more appropriate for the situation. He will turn the hearts of the father to their children, and the hearts of the children to their father. See, the truth is, why bother with it? Well, because Christianity is all about reconciliation and forgiveness. That's the message of Christianity. Without reconciliation, without forgiveness, there's no Christ. And it will stop you from moving on. I know a lot of people who took their bad attitude towards their father or mother and took it into their marriage, and it became a point of divorce. It's happened many times. The hurts that we carry around that we're unable to process and to heal from. God doesn't want us to live like that. Luke 7:36-47. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears, and then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. So notice that he called Jesus' divinity into question. Now that's important because Jesus is going to bring that up later on in the story. So remember that. He was questioning whether he was God or even a prophet. Jesus answered him, Simon, I have something to tell you. Tell me, teacher, he said. 2 people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii, the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back. Notice that part. That's a very important part of the story. Neither of them could pay the money back. So he forgave the debts of both of them. Now, which of them will love him more? And then you can hear his grudging reply. Simon replied, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven. You see what I mean? Like, I see where you're going with this, and I don't like it, so I suppose that. You have judged correctly, Jesus said. Now, this is funny because he's the one who's judging her and God. He is literally judging God and this woman. And so then Jesus says, as a little bit of irony, you have judged correctly. Like salt in the eyes, huh? Jesus said, then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. Now hold on, we're going to tie some things in here. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little. So first off, I want to point out that Jesus just clarified that he is both God and a prophet by saying her many sins were forgiven. A, how could he know that the sins were forgiven? And B, how could he offer forgiveness for the sins? See, the thing is, they were both sinners with the debt. The Pharisee and the woman, they were both sinners with the debt. The difference was that she was forgiven, and because she was forgiven, she loved much. Isn't that what Jesus just said? As her great love has shown. So because she was forgiven, she loved Jesus much. And what you can tell how much she loved Jesus because she wasn't angry with the man, the Pharisee, for judging her. He was kind of being a jerk. Can we all kind of agree on that? And yet, do you see how she wasn't even concerned with what he was saying? It's all right. It's fine. But if you notice, he didn't have love. This Pharisee didn't have love. Why? Because he wasn't forgiven. Why? Because he didn't trust Jesus. Look at the story. You didn't do these things. She did, and she's shown this love because she's forgiven. The implication then would be that he wasn't. Now, that brings up a very interesting question. He thought that she was the person in the story who was forgiven much. The question now becomes, or was she the one who was forgiven little and he has much that he needs forgiveness for? See, Jesus never clarifies. And now he's left, the Pharisee is left with his own prejudice. And he has to work through the situation on his own. So it gets a little bit better than that. He didn't have love because he wasn't forgiven. So instead, he judged her to feel better about himself. See, there's something very important. You are a sinner saved by grace. Those people who hurt you, they are sinners too. You are sinners too. What we do is we put a great divide. I'm a sinner, but I'm not like that. Don't keep record of other people's sin. Well, look at what this person did. Look at what this person... How about this? You worry about you. Just this morning, my son felt the need to go in there and reprimand his sisters. One, because she wore a dress. Evidently, she wore this dress too much, whatever that means. And the other one, he felt the need to reprimand because she was singing a song. Worry about your sin instead of following everybody else around, worrying about their sin. What we do is we say something like this, but I'm a little sinner. Neither of them had the money to pay him back. You're a little sinner who still can't pay. When you start to realize God's greatness and stop realizing other people's faults and sin, you'll be a lot happier in life. It's easy to see everybody that hurts you because you have to carry that weight. But you don't have to. You could give it up. People are not your enemy. No matter how bad they hurt you, they're not your enemy. Some of us had a father who wasn't that bad, he just wasn't perfect. And so we went the rest of our life griping and complaining about how our father wasn't perfect. I mean, he was around, maybe he just, had a short temper, or maybe he, just little things like that kind of maybe personally irritated us. Honestly, in today's world, if you had your father around at all, your leaps and bounds around people, I mean, you don't know how many people have been abandoned by their fathers. It's something that I'm seeing every single day on every single face. If there could be a motto for Otero County, it would be the place with no fathers. So if you did have your father around and you're mad because of something little he did, just let it go. Just let it go. However, with that being said, it's not a competition. Oh, who had the worst father? Back in my day, it was my dad could beat up your dad. Now it's, my dad was worse than your dad. It's not a competition. Your hurt is instead an opportunity. And you could say, what could my hurt possibly be an opportunity for? Well, let me give you a couple ideas. Number one, it could be an opportunity to help others. Maybe there's someone out there who can't forgive their father. Maybe you could come alongside them and help them to forgive their father. But how can you do that if you have not forgiven your own father? Maybe instead is an opportunity for you to seek healing and to learn God in a new way than you ever known him before. Maybe it's an opportunity for you to be a father to those who don't have a father. More so than ever, the world needs strong men who are willing to come alongside these kids who don't have fathers. Single mothers need to know that they're not alone, that the church cares. Kids need to know that there's a safe place that they can go. The option is very clear that we as men have to learn to step up and be fathers not just to our own kids, but to try and help pick up the slack for other people's kids. See, the young they need the old people's help. But that's difficult because it's very hard not to complain about them. Maybe you don't like their style of dress. Maybe you don't like their style of music. It's just so easy to find things to nitpick with. But what they really need isn't your complaints. They need you to come alongside and help. God, the great Father, is wanting fathers to come alongside the fatherless. Just as he is the God of the fatherless, he wants us to be the fathers of the fatherless. It's nothing groundbreaking. This is what the entire prophets hinged on. But I will say this, the longer you wait to deal with your attitude problem, the harder it gets for 3 easy reasons. Number one, you stop seeing the problem. It's their fault. I don't have to change, it's their fault. You stop seeing the problem. Number 2, pain tolerance decreases with age. The older you get, the harder it is to deal with the pain of change. That's just a fact of life. The longer something is left unaddressed, the more firm it gets. And it's harder to deal with things and to change things the older you get. Pain tolerance decreases with age. Did you ever notice how God made it where 70-year-old women aren't giving birth to babies anymore? Just a joke. Number 3. So number 1 was we stop seeing the problem. Number 2, our pain tolerance decreases. Number 3, the pain gets worse. It's kind of like dealing with panic attacks. If you start dealing with your panic attacks the moment that you deal with them, it gets a lot easier. But if you let it lie for a couple of years, it gets a lot harder to deal with it. And it's now you've lost momentum. You have to start building up steam. And the bad thing about all this is that nobody can choose for you. You have to get the point of saying, okay, I'm moving forward. I'm not going to be bitter anymore. I'm forgiving, and I'm seeking reconciliation. If they don't want reconciliation, that's fine. I'm going to still have that heart in myself. However, God is leading you there, and he will bring things by. He will. He won't just leave you there to be bitter. So here's a couple of things that you could do that could help you. I know that it's difficult, even daunting to even think about the prospect of addressing hurt. And you might think that it's a lot harder to heal if the person that hurts you is dead. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. You can find a way forward. You can. Number 1, don't repeat the hurt in your head. Learn to control your thinking. Don't keep thinking about all the ways that they did you wrong, all the ways that it's their fault. Number 2, learn to respect without qualifying. What we do is we do something along the lines of this. I'll respect them if they do this. I do respect them, but they need to, see what I mean? We always have a but. You have to learn to be a respectful person and an honoring person, not because someone else deserved it, because that's who you need to be. You need to learn to respect people. And Ephesians 6:2 even talks about this, and the law does too. Learn to honor your mother and father. Well, honoring doesn't always mean obeying. It doesn't. But it's more about how you treat them and how you think about them. Are you watching out for your parents? There was a guy that my dad used to work for who, this is kind of funny, he used to call his boss sir all the time, and, sir this, sir that, sir this, or that. And my dad, being from up north, people are just brainless up there, so and don't hold it against him. Just kidding, it's a joke. But you don't call bosses sir up north. You just don't do that. So he was out of the loop on this one, and the other guys, sir this, sir that. Well, as time went on, the guy ended up starting, just ragging on his boss about what a terrible boss he was and how he was this and that, and going on and on and on and on. And the boss was standing right behind him. And so my dad's like, yeah, but and he kept trying to change the subject, like, buddy, what are you doing? And, it didn't work, so my dad just walked away. And then the boss came up to him later, and he said, it really bothered me when you didn't call me sir when you started working for me. But I tell you what, you've got my back, and I don't have to always be looking over it to see if you're talking bad about me to the other workers. See what I mean? So which of the two respected and honored the boss? Was it my dad who didn't say sir, or was it the other young guy who shot off his mouth and said sir? See what I mean? Respecting and honoring is more a part of who you are. It's not always that you obey on everything. That's not what I'm saying. It's the attitude that you have. And if you can't learn to honor and respect those who don't deserve it, it's going to be very difficult to move forward. So don't repeat the hurt. Respect without qualifying. That takes us to the next thing, which gets a little bit difficult. You have to learn to leave it in God's hands. Ooh, that's a difficult one. You have to release control. And that's very difficult. It's going to be trial and error. There's no easy way to tell you like a simple process of how to do it. It's just something that you have to learn how to do. I know for me, this is what worked. I was alone because I felt kind of awkward and stupid, and I don't like doing things that make me feel awkward and stupid. So I was alone in my room, and I went like this, like I was holding on to it, and then I went like this: God, I abandon my claim. Anything that they've done to hurt me, that's in your hands. It's up to you. I release it. And I literally went like this because for me, it helped me to address the issue and to just learn to let it go. I abandoned my claim. See, because what that means is so I can't get mad about it anymore, because if I start to get mad, I'll say, I don't have the right to get mad. I abandoned that already. That's not mine anymore. That's God's. And I just have to remind myself about that. See what I mean? And now, here we are months later, and I have a problem with it anymore because I released it. Leave it in God's hands. Grieve, process, learn how it impacted you, and then deal with it. Deal with it. You can't just push hurt and pain to the side and say, whatever. Learn to deal with it. You got to move forward, because life won't just move you forward. If you move forward, it's going to be because you fought and strived and moved forward. That's how you move forward. It's not like you wake up one day and, I don't have a bad attitude anymore. It's not going to happen. You have to drag yourself through the trenches. And, for this, it might be wise to see a counselor. I don't need a counselor. Okay, all right, but I'm just saying, if you ever feel overwhelmed, you might want to consider it. They have a whole confidentiality thing, and I'm not gonna tell people that you went to a counselor. Counselors are just trying to help you to get better. Now, some of them are good at it, and some of them aren't good at it, but still, it's worth trying. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention is learn how to see the situation objectively. Now, this gets very, very difficult because it's not an objective thing that happened. It's very much so something that happened to us. it's very much so subjective to us and our experience. It hurt. We dealt with it. It's something we live with every day. It's not something you just, you see what I mean? So how do you learn to look at something objectively that happened and caused so much great hurt? Well, it's difficult. There's a few things that you can do. You can learn to embrace it. It's a part of who you are. Stop saying what should have happened or what could have happened and realize that this is what did happen. Realize that it's in the past, and you don't have to do it again. It's in the past. You can realize that hurt people, and as long as you are hurt, you will also repeat the cycle that others have done to you. Also, you can realize the fact that you can't fix them. You don't have to try. It's okay. Another thing is you have to truly, truly look at yourself and say, it's not my fault. You have to be able to come to a point of saying, this person hurt me and it's not my fault. If you were raped, if you were abused by a father or some other authority figure, you have to come to a place of saying, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. And you have to truly believe it. You have to allow yourself to forgive yourself. Sometimes we feel, oh, I'm weak, or I wasn't able to do something about it. You have to come to the place of saying, it happened. It's a part of who I am. I don't have to go through it again. I can't fix them. I can't change what happened, and it's not my fault that it happened. You can change, and there is hope for tomorrow if you work at it. Along the line, we say something along the lines of this, I'm fine. Well, ignoring really isn't forgiving. Look at the consequences of your life. The consequences in your life of avoiding it. Maybe you try to control others. Maybe you have low self-esteem. Maybe you have panic and anxiety. Maybe you have hurt relationships. Maybe every time that you try to get close to somebody, you end up pushing them away on accident. Maybe you have a poor control over your emotions. Maybe you're living your life in this constant struggle of trying to prove you're strong, that you're worth it, wondering if you're worthy of love, trying to prove yourself to others. And maybe you'll never get over that. I don't know. And I know that it's okay to struggle. But I know it's just about anything's better than living with the constant bitterness. There's a better way of life. Salvation at first brings joy, a lot of joy. But if you hold on to the hurt, you become miserable in time. And there's this little part that I want to jerk. Jesus is telling this story of these. It's a parable is what it's called, but of this guy that's planting seed. And I just want to take one little part out of that story because I think it applies to what we're talking about. Since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes, they quickly fall away. The worries of this life choke the word, making it unfruitful. And I think that that's a lot of times what can happen with that hurt if we don't address it. So how does this apply? Well, let's wrap things up. There's a lot of books out there about perfect parenting, and I'm not saying you shouldn't try, but realize that the perfect parent doesn't exist. I mean, it's good that you try, it's good that you love your kids, but realize that the perfect parent doesn't exist. And if you think that you are the perfect parent, you're just wrong. I mean, you're just wrong. But I will say this, fathers can make a big difference. So then you might say, well, the dad's not even around. So that's why this is for not just fathers, but also single mothers. Be present. You want to make a big impact on your kid's life? Be present. Well, a lot of times, especially when I was a kid, there was this idea that if you wanted your kids to love you, you had to buy them by giving them enough gifts. It's all about, hey, we're poorer than those people, so my kids can't possibly love me. It's not about how much crap you give your kids. Be present with them. That's it. Be present. You don't have to be a perfect parent, you have to be a present one. Love your kids. You are called by God to do the most important job you will ever do. Maybe you don't have kids. Maybe your kids are already moved off. Whatever. Be a father to those who don't have fathers. Learn to be a mentor, taking in the younger under your wing. Paul did this with Timothy, and I think it really worked out well for him. But I do want to say this. A lot of times people will try and substitute the missing relationship. I've seen a lot of, especially mothers that are around 20s, maybe sometimes into their 30s, they try to do this. Basically, the dad's not around for whatever reason, And so they try to just insert any guy into the you know that your kids know that it's not their father? Did you know that? I mean, there's no way around that. And so a lot of these times, these mothers mean well, but it only causes further harm because they bring some guy in that they're a big fan of, but then their kids are not a big fan of. And sometimes it doesn't work, and, obviously, and this is just the little quick thing I want to say there. Don't rush into a new relationship. Watch who you are allowing around your kids, because I will say this more than once, especially around here. I don't know about the rest of the world. I don't live in the rest of the world, but here, I've seen a lot of times where moms will be so desperate that they'll bring some guy in, and he'll just be an abusive guy. He'll just be a molesting guy. You really got to be careful who you're allowing around your kids. Don't be so hungry and hungry for emotional health, for love, that you're willing to throw your kids away. I mean, there's got to be a line when you have to realize it's going to hurt, but you can't subject your kids to that. You can't. Being a single parent is hard. Introducing a guy into the equation that doesn't care for your kids, had nothing to do with their creation, and is just kind of a general jerk, makes a hard situation worse. Just be careful with that. I used to think when I was younger that, there was these few people who had daddy problems. And the older I get, the more I realize that everyone has daddy issues. Everyone does. Your dad wasn't perfect. We have to come to a point of forgiving our fathers for the different things. Doesn't matter if they did something big or little, you have to forgive. So that takes us to the children. Learn to meet with God. God says that He's the father to the fatherless, and He meets with the fatherless in a very special way that He doesn't meet with anyone else. Psalm 68:5 even says this: "A father to the fatherless, a defender of widows is God in His holy dwelling." That is the core of God. God cannot separate the fact that He watches out for those who are hurt. You have to come to a place, though, as children. As children, you have to come to a place of being okay with moving on. You don't have to keep subjecting yourself to abusive relationships. Sometimes you do need separation. But you have to learn to be a respectful and loving person regardless of what other people do. Sometimes we say something along the lines of this: if they would just say sorry. Let me just tell you this: the apology won't take the hurt away. We like to live with regrets because that's who we are. But the apology won't take the hurt away. You have to work through it. So obviously at this point, we can go one or two ways. Number one, it's hard to forgive. Number two, it's hard not to forgive. It's hard to walk with bitterness, and it's hard to face the bitterness. Which hard do you want? As a priority in your life, you need to deal with your attitude with your father. Apologize for your bad attitude. And you could say, I have to apologize to them? Don't be a murderer because someone else tried to murder you. Maybe you need to get space, but be willing to make it work. And have that openness where even if they shut you down again, where you can move forward in the future and say, if they come around, we'll move forward. If they don't, I forgive them and I release that what they owe me. I release it. They don't owe me anything. Being selfish with your emotions because they were selfish won't fix anything. Two wrongs don't make a right. So now we'll go to the very last thing. Now this is a very interesting thing, and this is really what we're closing on. This is not a joke. I'm not going to string this on for another 20 minutes. Start the timer. There's a story about a guy named Job, and this is really an interesting story. He loses pretty much everything. All of his kids die, all of them, and he loses a crap ton of his stuff. I mean, he still has the ash on his head, and just a really hard situation. And then he loses his health. Boys, if that's not the final nail in the coffin, the final straw that broke the camel's back. So then he's pretty much just wiped out. He's just lying on the ground like, this sucks. And he has these friends that come by, friends like these, right? And so he was hurt, and his friends, they make it worse. They don't really help him at all. They pretty much just tell him, hey, it's your own fault that you're in this condition. Gee, thanks, fellas. And very interesting story. But at the end, God says this, and this just blows me away. Pay very close attention. After the Lord had said these things to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, which was one of the guys, I am angry with you and your two friends because you have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has. So now take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job and sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer. Okay? Well, if you're going to accept the prayer anyways, why do I have to go and make the situation right? Why can't you just forgive me and we can just pretend it didn't happen? And not deal with you according to your folly. Oh, boy. You have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has. So Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite did what the Lord told them, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer. After Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. What did he just say? After. Well, who was the victim in the story? Job was. And yet God did not restore him until he restored them. Do you get the implication for your relationship with your Father? Sometimes the healing that you want requires for you to go bring healing. This is a big thing, and I hope that you remember it. We have service tonight at that says 10, but that's a liar. The service is not at 10 tonight. If we started service at 10 o'clock in the evening, man, I'd be asleep. So it's actually it's at 6. 6. So we changed the time. Lord, thank you for what you're doing in His enthusiasm, and I pray especially for those who are just having a hard time. Maybe some are just having a hard time being a father. And I pray you'd help them to have the courage and the strength to not shy away from what you've called them to. And Lord, I pray for those who don't have fathers that you would make yourself very real to them, but also that you would draw people to come alongside them and really be there for them. Kids need families, God. Help us to be the family. Lord, I pray that no single mother in Tularosa would feel alone. God, I pray that we would love so well that no single mother in all of Tularosa would feel alone. And Lord, I pray especially for those who are just hurt and bitter, and they've been hurt and bitter for a long time. Help them to find the healing and forgiveness that they so desperately need. I know that what happened in the past can't be changed. It happened. But it doesn't have to own them for forever.